Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about learning new rules, the conundrum for every wargamer. So there's something strangely comforting about hearing other wargamers, especially the seasoned veterans of the hobby, admit that they find learning new rules a challenge. And that was the bit of the latest Wargame Soldiers and Strategy podcast that really struck a chord with me. Now, I've always struggled reading rulebooks, not because I don't want to learn the rules or because I don't care, but because I'm simply not wired to absorb information in that sort of way by just reading alone. And clearly, I'm not the only one. Sitting down with a newly purchased rulebook can be an exciting moment. It's full of promise. You flick through it, admire the pictures, maybe glance at the scenarios, but then comes the hard part, actually reading it cover to cover and learning how to play. Now, I envy those people who can read a rulebook once and then have it all locked into their memory like a well-oiled machine. That's never been me. I can enjoy reading the rules for a sense of flavour and structure, but I struggle to make them stick without more active engagement. But thankfully, we live in an age where resources are everywhere. And one of the most helpful, to me anyway, is YouTube. There's something about seeing the rules in action that clicks far more effectively than just reading about them. Video tutorials, reviews, walkthroughs of the rule books have become an essential part of how I learn a new game. Now, that said, my attention span doesn't always stretch to sitting through hours long recorded battle reports. Some playthroughs are wonderful, but watching a full game can sometimes feel like hard work if you're short on time or just need to grasp the core mechanics quickly. Now, what I do find incredibly helpful are those condensed or structured videos, things like how to play in 15 minutes or rules overview with examples. These often focus on the game's core mechanics, show a few turns being played and highlight common mistakes or misunderstandings. For people like me, they're gold dust. They bridge the gap between the rulebook and the tabletop in a way that's visual and practical. Of course, the ultimate shortcut to learn a game is to play it with someone who already knows. So last year I had my first outing with sharp practice at a Lardy Games Day. It wasn't a full simulation with every rule meticulously applied. In fact, we deliberately skipped a fair bit just to keep the game moving and let the narrative emerge. But in those few hours I learned more than I would have done just sitting with the book on my own. It was an interactive lesson, complete with immediate feedback, shared laughter and those wonderful moments when a mechanic just suddenly made sense. Now, that experience stuck with me. I went out and bought sharp practice shortly afterwards, and Ray and I decided to use it for our collaborative project. Having played it once, giving it an abbreviated form gave me the confidence to dive deeper into the rules. I had a sense of how the game flowed, what the key decisions were and why certain mechanics mattered. It wasn't perfect knowledge, but it was a solid starting point. And of course, this is where clubs and demo games and game days really come into their own. If you've got access to a community or even just a few friends who enjoy the same kind of games, there's a huge opportunity to learn from each other. Someone will have already done the heavy lifting, understood the tricky bits and can help you shortcut your way to playing. And once you've had that experience, it's amazing how quickly things fall into place. But sooner or later the table turns. You go from being the learner to being the teacher, and that's a different kind of challenge altogether. I've had to do that a few times recently, most notably when I introduced my group to Test of Resolve. Teaching a game to others is a whole new skill, and it starts long before anyone ever rolls the dice. Now, I learned the hard way that preparation is absolutely everything. The very first time I ran a game for the Rejects many years ago, I wasn't properly ready. I'd skimmed the rules, but I hadn't fully grasped the mechanics. I thought I'd be able to wing it. Spoiler alert, I couldn't. It was a mess. Players were confused, I was frustrated, and then the game never really got going. It wasn't enjoyable for anyone, and I came away from it knowing I had to do better next time. So when I came to teach Test of Resolve to the group, I took a completely different approach. I made sure I really understood the rules, particularly the core mechanics of how turns and actions worked. I played it solo a couple of times, not to simulate a full battle, but just to see how the flow worked. I tried out specific situations I thought might crop up during the game. I even wrote down answers to the kind of questions I guessed people would end up asking, and drew diagrams to illustrate trickier points. It might all sound like overkill, but it really worked. I felt more confident, and so the players trusted me to guide them. We didn't get bogged down in confusion, and because the game ran more smoothly, everyone had more fun. That's what you're aiming for, not to recite the rulebook from memory, but to create an environment where people can enjoy themselves while gradually learning the game system. Now, one of the most practical tools I created for that particular game was a custom quick reference sheet. The one in the rulebook was okay, but it didn't quite highlight the things that tripped up new players, so I put together my own, focusing on the flow of play and the basic modifiers that come up most often. And after the first game, I refined it based on feedback and actual gameplay experience. I'll probably tweak it again before the next session, or maybe even end up rewriting the rules to suit my particular quirks. It's a living document, really, and it's really there to make learning easier for everyone at the games table. And of course, teaching a new game is partly about mechanics, of course, but it's also about mindset. You need to be patient, positive and flexible. Don't throw everything at new players all at once. Start simple. Pick a small scenario, leave out the more complex layers of the game until they're comfortable with the basics. Most people will learn by doing, and it's much more effective to let them get hands-on experience than to bombard them with too much theory up front. It's also important to remind yourself and your players that it's okay to make mistakes. It's part of the learning process. If someone forgets a rule or applies it incorrectly, correct it gently and move on. The aim isn't to run a perfect tournament level game, it's to create an enjoyable experience that gives everyone a feel for how the game works and why it's worth playing it again. Perhaps the most important lesson of all is to remember why we're doing this in the first place. We're not learning rules for the sake of it. We're doing it because we love wargaming, because we enjoy the drama of battle, the satisfaction of strategy, the stories that emerge from even the humblest skirmish. Rules are just the scaffolding that holds that experience together. They matter, but they shouldn't dominate the table. If everyone's having a good time, then you're doing it right. So if you're someone who struggles to learn new rules, take heart. You're not alone. Even the most experienced wargamers sometimes feel overwhelmed by dense rulebooks or complex systems. Use the resources that work for you, whether that's YouTube, solo play, or learning from a friend. And when it's your turn to teach, do it with care, with patience, and above all, with a sense of fun. Because in the end, that's what brings people back to the table. Not just clever mechanics or detailed simulations, but shared enjoyment. The laughter, the stories, the moments of triumph and disaster. That's the real heart of the hobby. And if you can help someone else get there a bit more easily by teaching them a new game, then you've done something truly valuable. So, as usual, I want to turn this question around and ask, how do you learn and teach new rules? If you could pick one top tip for learning new rules, what would it be and why? And similarly, what one bit of advice would you give to anyone wanting to teach a set of rules to new players? And why is it the most important lesson from your perspective? As always, I would love to hear what you think in the comments below. So before I move on to a workbench up, I just wanted to apologise if there's any random sounds, in particular dogs barking or streamers or helicopters, all sorts of things. It's a blisteringly hot week here in the UK, and I've got all the windows and doors open. There's absolutely no way I was going to lock everything down just so I could film this video, so apologies again if you hear some random noises from outside. Needs must, I'm afraid. So we have time for a workbench update. Now, back in the operations room, otherwise known as the desk of eternal backlog, I've been wrestling once again with my Cossacks. Yes, those Cossacks, the ones that have been sitting on my desk like passive-aggressive paperweights for far too long. I know, I've said before that I'll get them finished next week, but this time I really do mean it, probably. Progress is happening just at the speed of a wounded baggage train in a snowstorm. Now, the main reason the Cossacks have been delayed is that I got sidetracked by a rather satisfying little side quest, finishing some shock dials. You might remember I started these a few weeks ago. The idea is to record shock during games without resorting to tons of plastic counters scattered all over the table like wargaming litter. Each dial is themed with snow and bits of terrain to help them blend seamlessly into the wintry battlefield. Naturally, of course, in my usual style of going slightly overboard, I made about 20 of them, because why make 6 when you can make 20 and panic about storage later? Still, I'd rather have too many than end up one short at a critical moment in a game. Better to be a shock dial holder than a shock dial beggar, I always say. However, all of that fades into insignificance compared to what Ran and I managed to achieve on Tuesday. So I took the day off and was able to spend the whole day with him, and we decided to focus entirely on train for our retreat from Moscow project. Spoiler, we got a hell of a lot done, and we may also have sweated out half our body weight in the process. First up, we completed our new gaming mat made from a fleece throw that we picked up at Dunelm. Yes, I had an actual fleece blanket, because when you're on a budget and mildly crafty, household textiles are fair game. We painted it ourselves, which was hard work, especially since it turned out to be one of the hottest days of the year. Between the sun, the fleece and the sheer amount of paint involved, it felt like a DIY sauna with brushes. In hindsight, I'm not entirely sure we saved money, especially after we tallied up all the paint we used, but we did end up with a glorious 7 foot by 7 foot custom mat that is exactly what we wanted. Next up was our batch of newly commissioned river sections that we got made by Last Valley. These needed painting, texturing, finishing, and we tackled them with industrial efficiency. We even got started on the tree bases, although actual trees are still somewhere in the to-do list. We had a proper terrain production ongoing at one point, adding texture with sand and grit, base coating everything in a hearty layer of earth brown, and then finishing with our signature snow mix and a smattering of frosty grass tufts. It was one of those days where you don't realise how much you've got done until you stop, look around and wonder where all the clean brushes went. Now, I did film a short behind the scenes video of our blisteringly hot terrain building marathon, which went up on the channel on Friday. So if you'd like to get a little look of what we were up to, how much paint, fleece and sweat goes into building a winter battlefield from scratch, go give it a watch. Just don't expect us to look glamorous. We were more battle-weary sapper than Pinterest-ready hobbyist. So as always, please join the conversation in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share. And if you want to keep up to date with weekly content from this channel, please tap the bell notification icon. So until next week, stay safe, keep gaming, and of course, keep rolling high.